Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to announce that a buffet supper will be served in the next room in 5 minutes. In order to get you in that room quickly, Mr. Schmalhausen will sing a soprano solo in this room.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Marx Brothers Council podcast, Episode 2, Noah, Bob, Joe, and sometimes Matthew, featuring a special appearance by the wonderful, talented, and liberal Joe Adamson. We'll be talking to him later in the show. In the meantime, I'm here with my regular cohorts, Noah Diamond and Matthew Conium.
Hello.
Hello.
First of all, we wanted to thank everyone for the great feedback for our first episode. We were unsure how it's going to be received, and it's been quite good. Nothing but good comments. And, we also want to especially thank the people who didn't like the show for keeping your mouth shut, and we hope you'll continue to do that.
Yeah, and if you like the show, please give us a review on iTunes or comment on our blog. Talk about how much you like us and share your opinions, because it's important to express yourself if you like our podcast.
Was there any feedback or comments about our first show that surprised or?
The Chico thing got a bit of interest, as I was expecting it to be honest. I think there was quite a few people sort of wanting to pat you on the back for your stance. There was a little bit of this is revisionism gone crazy, but I think it's one of those annoying issues, or annoying for me, in that I really can see both sides, which is not, it doesn't happen very often, and it doesn't feel terribly comfortable. So I don't really have a dog in the race. But I think the only other thing that I thought of afterwards to maybe add was that even at the end, the fact that Groucho and everybody still calls him Chico, I think is understandable when you remember that they really did use those names. I mean, Groucho would literally pick up the phone and say, "How are you doing, Harpo?" And Harpo would say, "Great, great." So they actually did use those names. So obviously they're not going to suddenly change their pronunciation. But even at the very end, when Groucho is on the talk shows and he's saying, Chico was called Chico because he used to chase the boys, he would never then say, "Oh, and by the way, it is Chico."
That was uncanny, man.
Oh, well, they do. But even at that, that God-given opportunity, he didn't then stop and say, "Oh, and by the way, it is Chico, it's not Chico." As Noah said last time, they really didn't care. And in fact, I remember Noah showing me a letter, I think it was in the Smithsonian, that Chico wrote to Gummo around about the time of Love Happy, when Chico was in London. Yeah. And Chico gave his daughter the middle name Gummo. She was born Maxine Gummo Marx, and yet here he is writing to Gummo, and not only on the envelope, on the address, but throughout the letter he spells it with one M, like Gumo. They simply didn't care about this stuff.
I gave my daughter the middle name Gummo, and it never even occurred to me that was the name of one of the Marxes. Hey, by the way, I just noticed I'm thinking about my intro here, because I've never introed a show. I didn't introduce myself.
Who are you?
Who are you anyway?
I'm Bob Cassell.
We were wondering, but we didn't want to ask.
Well, I got the pronunciation in again, just for all those who missed it the first time.
I'm fine. Who are you?
And as far as reaction to our first episode, again, we did get one comment. Do you remember who that was from, Matthew, the one we're going to talk about?
I don't. Was it Dave something? Does that help? I think it was Dave something.
I don't know how sincere he was, but it sort of bothered him that we agreed perhaps a bit too much for his taste, in which we had some more disagreements and different takes. And obviously that's going to happen down the line, but our overall views are quite similar. We might have a different preference, but it's not like you hate something that I love or vice versa. I don't believe.
Yeah, we do share some eccentricities, I think, in that we're all, unusually well disposed to coconuts, unusually not bothered by room service. So unfortunately, there is that kind of lack of disagreement there.
I think we've influenced each other a little bit too. A lot of the things that we will undoubtedly discuss as this podcast continues to rack up episodes are things that we've been over in the Marx Brothers Council Facebook group. Yes. To the point where we have at least considered every available view of a lot of these questions.
The main one that I think some of you want to hear is our evaluation of Duck Soup, which myself and I think Noah might hold a bit higher than Matthew. And rather than get into the whole film this time, because we're going to do a dedicated show to Duck Soup as well as all the others at some point, but rather than focus on the whole film, let's focus on like one part of it that seems to bother Matthew, and that seems to be the stuff with Harpo going off on his Paul Revere ride in the horse, which I absolutely love, and Matthew doesn't seem to care for it all.
It's true. I'm not too keen on that. But then I'm not too keen on the opening either. I'm not too keen on the lemonade stand bit. But my if I had to choose one representative bit of Duck Soup that I would put forward as a least favorite, I would probably go for the Fredonia's Going to War musical number. How's that for putting the cat among the pigeons?
All right.
Well, it does seem like one of the areas where we disagree is that I like Duck Soup slightly better than Matthew does, and Bob likes it slightly better than I do. But I think the Paul Revere scene in particular is, to me, a very good encapsulation of the different approaches at war in Duck Soup. I don't particularly care for the, Laurel and Hardy style Ain't She Sweet instrumental playing under Harpo's infiltration of this poor married couple.
Oh, that was always my favorite part. I love
that. That doesn't do a lot for me. But I love the Marx Brothers in their Revolutionary War regalia in front of a curtain. It looks very much like the Napoleon scene or the Dubarry scene from Animal Crackers. The enemy is coming from afar with a hey na nani and a hot cha cha. I love that stuff very much, and it's part of that sequence.
The whole film is obviously leading towards a war finale, and how serious can they do it? They have to make it a farce. So.
Yeah, for me, I have mixed feelings about Duck Soup, and I think I do rank it a little lower than most fans tend to. Mm-hmm. But for me, the finale sequence is not part of the problem. Yeah. I know Help Is on the Way ranks very low in your regard, Matthew.
Yeah, it's awful, isn't it? The animals running about. It's really, really awful.
But it's one 10-second gag.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are lots of good jokes at the end in that big war finale. There are lots of good jokes in it, and on the whole, it's fine. And particularly Groucho changing his uniform all the time. That's fabulous, and plenty of other nice moments. But particularly that song, the Fredonia's Going to War song. Heidi, 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 ho! To war, to war, to war we're gonna go. Oh, Heidi, 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 ho! Oh, Heidi, 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 ho! Oh, Heidi, 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 ho! I think if that wasn't about going to war, if this makes any sense at all, but if you didn't have that excuse that it was part of this trailblazing anti-war satire, I can't imagine anybody watching that and thinking anything other than, oh, they're just mucking about here, aren't they? They're capering about like kids. It's kind of like the Ritz Brothers or something.
It's very possible that somewhere in that melee of people dancing around in that musical number is Leo McCarey. There are news clippings indicating that he did dress as a peasant for one of these later scenes. We've never been able to spot him. We had one little hunch that it's quite questionable, but if anybody ever spots him, that would be quite an accomplishment. So get your HD copies out, folks.
Haven't you guys theorized that McCarey might be the Honorable Pandu of Muftan or whoever
I did. I wanted to think that because he's not. Not. There's no actor linked to that role, and it's such an obvious. He's obviously a Caucasian guy with a big fake beard. So then that's the inevitable, obvious choice for somebody who wants to do a cameo. But since then, we found him being dressed up as a peasant, haven't we? So.
Yeah, we found the clipping that literally said he was dressing as a peasant, and the only thing that really is peasant is the gallery in the courtroom scene in the finale musical.
And I also thought he wouldn't want something that would have him on screen too long. The brilliant thing about the Pandu is he just kind of walks across the screen. It's tailor-made. If he's going to be in the chorus, he's going to be sort of stuck there while they do shoot after retake. But that seems to be where he is. God knows why he bothered, but there we are. Maybe there was more of him originally, and he got lost in the process of normal editing. But
yeah,
who knows?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So any other strong disagreements that you think we may have that you want to touch on? Matthew and I have spoken over the years, and we have disagreements on quite a bit of stuff, but not really Marx Brothers related. If we want to talk about the merits of the Beatles or Mystery Science Theater, then we got an episode.
Yeah, I understand. Maybe it's possible that our public demands that we disagree with each other more to keep this podcast dramatic and interesting. But barring any such effort, I don't feel a great chasm in our opinions of the Marx Brothers films.
All of which then leads us with fake spontaneity into the idea of what are our least favourite parts of the Marx Brothers films. I've just nominated Fredonia's Going to War as one of mine. For two reasons. One, because it's complete rubbish, and two, because it's going to annoy the maximum number of people, which I assume is basically the point of this exercise, is to get people riled. So that would be my first choice. What would be your suggestions for your all-time least favorite Marx moments?
Well, we had some ground rules here when we kicked this idea around. That I wanted to make sure that they didn't involve romantic subplots or musical numbers, because that would be too easy.
Proper Marx scenes.
Yes.
So I got number 3. It's going to surprise a lot of you. I am not a big fan of that opening reveal of the Marxes in Monkey Business when they come popping out of the barrel.
Oh my goodness!
I think it's a very iconic image. But just that first little exchange for 30, 40 seconds, it just seems like they're doing some vaudeville stuff to the camera. It doesn't really work for me as part of a movie.
This is the only way to travel, boys. The only way. I was going to bring along the wife and kiddies, but the grocer couldn't spare another barrel. I was going to bring my grandfather, but there's no room for his beard. Why don't you send for the old swine and let his beard come later? I sent for his beard. You did? Yeah, it's coming by hair mail. Say, fellas, I think I hear someone. Well, if it's the captain, I'm going to have a few words with him. My hot water's been cold for 3 days, and I haven't got room enough in here to swing a cat. In fact, I haven't even got a cat. My grandfather can swing a cat. Yeah. Hey, that'd make a good job for him. Yeah. Come on, man. Hey, someone's coming.
I have no problem with the jokes there. It's good material. It's just I don't like the staging. It's just sort of self-conscious and stagey and breaks the fourth wall, sort of, and not in a clever way.
To be honest, I think you're right. It doesn't feel like a movie, and that's sort of why I do like it. You can almost imagine the curtain coming up, and then the first thing the audience sees are these 4 barrels, and then you hear them talking, and then they pop out. It's incredibly theatrical, actually. It's very much like the start of a sketch or a show. But that's why I do like it.
Yeah, I would take that angle on it too. I love that moment, and especially as their first original film, and after 2 films based on their stage shows, the big question of how are you going to make this work, and the fact that before you see a single Marx Brother, you see these 4 obviously man-sized barrels in the hold. I love that. I think it's a great entrance.
Let me just clarify that I don't really hate the scene. I just, it gives me a sort of a sour taste in my mouth. It's just a little cringy and, I don't know, old-timey for me. And that's about the only time I've ever said that about the Marx Brothers.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, both of you have topped me here, because in trying to figure out my least favorite moments, I dearly wanted to come up with examples from the good films, because I thought it's, even if you restrict it to the Marx Brothers' own appearances, it's a little too easy to pick bad moments from the late films.
Right.
But whatever my misgivings might be about the Punch and Judy scene in Monkey Business, which I took some heat for, my opinion, in our first episode, that or maybe the lemonade stuff in Duck Soup, or the baby talk in the canoe in Horse Feathers, none of it is nearly as none of it grates on me like some of the stuff in the lesser films. So all 3 of my examples are from the final 3 MGMs.
Okay, that's fine.
And I guess the one that I like the most of these least favorites is the circus sequence itself in At the Circus, which I just find depressing.
Keep calm, folks. It's all part of the show.
Get me out of this cannon! Get me out of this cannon! Please, get me out of this cannon!
I know that many people see a lot of fond connection between what the Marx Brothers did and the world of the circus,
right.
which is historically tied in with vaudeville and variety entertainment, and there is a family resemblance among these things. But as has often been pointed out by Adamson and many others, the Marx Brothers, the argument that they belong in a circus and therefore it's not satisfying to see them in one. I don't know if that's always true, but for me it is definitely true here. And the obviously tricked up gags, the extremely low level of the Groucho humor in this movie in general is just exemplified by lines like calling Tarzan. I find it really embarrassing, and it seems to so specifically ignore the lesson of the success of the opera sequence in A Night at the Opera.
Right.
I think it has one funny moment in it, which is after Margaret Dumont is shot out of a cannon, which I don't approve of in itself. I love Chico, though, saying, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Dewsbury, I didn't know it was loaded."
I think that's why they didn't do the stage tour. She would not do that. She would not.
That is a great moment, though. Chico, I didn't know it was loaded. That sequence for me is everything that's wrong with that movie, and just seeing them in that context is a little painful.
I would just say that I think I'm slightly less bothered by the circus setting in general, because I think that the point of it is that they use the circus to disrupt another of her high society soirees. So it's not so much that they've been put in a circus setting because that suits them. It's that they're using it as a disruptive force. So I can sort of go that far with it. But of course you're right. It is a fairly desperate scene. The only thing I do like, you mentioned Groucho's commentary there, which I agree is reasonably witless, but I quite like the fact that Groucho's character is doing that when he knows full well that what he's commenting on isn't part of the show, but is a potential disaster that will involve multiple corpses, and yet he's blithely saying, "Keep calm, folks, it's all part of the show," and I hope he's got 2 pair of pants with that suit. When what he knows he's seeing really is a man being tormented by a homicidal gorilla. So I think there's kind of a hint of the old Groucho there, but I wouldn't push it too far.
Maybe a hint, and I guess it's deliberately evocative of some of his conduct in the opera scene, and also the old barn scene in Monkey Business, where he becomes the kind of color commentator. He also does a bit of that at the football game in Horse Feathers. I agree with as a nuanced observation, it is true that it's not quite as simple as the Marx Brothers invading a circus versus invading a cocktail party or an opera house. Mm-hmm. They do inflict the circus on the elite Margaret Dumont world. Nevertheless, the effect of the movie still is you come away with, it was the Marx Brothers at the circus.
Yes. Which
is a diminished Marx Brothers, even if it had been a great script.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I suppose I should also, having thrown that duck soup one in, I'll take from the final 3, and I guess I have to stick with the one that I nominate in my book as my least favourite, which is You Can't Argue with Love from Go West.
She's mad about me, is what woman isn't? I know, you're going to ask, what is my secret? You rotter, you scrounge. The secret is never let her know you care. Never pursue her. Let her pursue you. Fan the flame of desire with the bellows of indifference. Didn't we meet at Monte Carlo the night you blew your brains out? How we laughed.
The reason why I think that sequence is so especially cringy is because although Groucho's jokes in it are no worse than his jokes elsewhere in the film, they've been put into a very specific context, a musical sort of context that demands much more of them, and which they're singularly unable to deliver up. In the musical breaks, between each verse, he's coming in with a line, and each one is supposed to be a woofer, and obviously they're not. And he does all those awful vocal things like goo, let's break, all that stuff, and how we laughed. Very, very embarrassing, over the top stuff. But then particularly that last one, which is an okay joke about having a wick in his mouth or something. That's supposed to kind of propel him on a cloud of laughter into joining in with the last line of the song. And when you're watching it, particularly if you're watching it on your own, but to be honest, if you're watching it with 100 people, you just, oh my God, that faked momentum, that faked energy, it just sort of flaps like a dying fish.
My second one, I've mentioned this before, and I even mentioned the last episode, but I'll go through it again, is the infamous scene at the circus where Groucho is trying to get the money back from Eve Arden and somehow ends up stuck on the ceiling.
Hey, Pauline, help me down. Pauline, let me have that wallet. Oh, Pauline, I'm stuck up. Let me down. Pauline, how do I get out of here? Pauline, quick, help, Pauline, help. Get me down, Pauline. Pauline, fall, Pauline. Help me down. Get me off the ceiling. Help, I'm stuck up.
He's been totally taken by this woman. It's been outsmarted and has nothing funny to say. And it's just up there yelling. And it's not that I don't want to see Groucho outsmarted, but I want to see him outsmarted by Harpo or Chico. You know, I'd even take Zeppo outsmarting him. That'd be a good scene.
If he hadn't left the act, Zeppo probably would have played Pauline in At the Circus.
Yeah, from the moment he simpers on in that outfit, looking all embarrassed, to the very, to him crashing to the ground when Harpo undoes his boots, it's a very painful spectacle of a hugely diminished man.
Not only is it unfunny, it sort of grates on me how unfunny it is.
Yeah, and I think your expectations make a difference as well. You have it's reasonable to presume that this is going to be a good comedy sequence. So your disappointment is the greater. And obviously something like Harpo being tortured in Love Happy with that sopping wet wig on is worse. But you have no expectations of that, so it sort of, you forget about it. But when you have a big scene set up like that and it turns into that, then that does stick in the memory more.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of our choices for these least favorite moments have to do with scenes or moments that are not funny plus. Like, they're not funny, and then there's something else about them that's difficult or painful or otherwise unappealing. And my number 2 choice is very much one of those. It's the whole scene at the Indian camp in Go West.
Yes.
Canelo, this Indian's no Indian.
If he's no Indian, why is he wearing a chicken for a hat?
He's half Indian and half ostrich.
I think the only thing it has going for it is what immediately follows it, which is an unusual harp solo from Harpo, played on a sort of loom rather than a harp. And that is interesting as a sort of, it just mixes up the formula in a way. However, the rest of that scene for me is a complete loss, and the level of comedy is so low, and the use of the Marx Brothers characters is so it misses the mark so consistently that there's no reason to forgive the depiction of
and that was one of the scenes done on the road tour. That was
it's hard to imagine how they really worked on that to get it up to its level.
It boggles the mind to think about what the original version was before they honed it.
If it were a wonderful comedy scene, then we would make all the usual excuses about it was standard for its time, and it's in some sense a satire of Westerns, which were guilty of the same thing. But this absolute cringe-inspiring depiction of Native Americans or First Nations, combined with the Marx Brothers operating on a level you just wish you could say that this material was unworthy of them.
When you think about it, it's actually a blessing in disguise, because if it was a good scene, we probably wouldn't be able to enjoy it these days anyhow. So thank you, Mr. Bretcher, for your lousy writing.
I think "Me want Cadillac sedan" is a line that never should have made it into a Marx Brothers movie.
It's when Groucho starts singing "My Body Lies Over the Ocean" that gets me, because it's set up in such a crass, that tiny little bit of music played on whatever it is, on a ram's horn or something, and then in he comes, in his usual Ed Buzzell form. He kind of dives in with like, and he lies. Oh my god!
And so many of these lines, I don't know why we don't stop at a regular motel.
Yeah, slot machine.
She's been off the reservation. Slot machine.
There's one thing that could have saved it, is they could have said they were going to scalp him and rip the toupee off. That might have saved the scene and the film.
Alas, we would have to wait for Blazing Saddles to set the Western straight on this subject.
Right, so my next choice then is one that is kind of halfway between the Your Monkey Business one and then the the more obvious choices from the later ones. I hope it passes because it's not 100% a Marx comedy scene, but it's not like a romantic song or anything like that. And it's the finale of A Day at the Races.
Mr. Morgan, would you mind telling the radio audience what a heel you are?
I'll come back later. Oh, I've had enough of this.
Because of all the things in A Day at the Races that I'm not so keen on, most of them you can see what the idea was. Usually it's a fairly obvious imitation of something that had been in A Night at the Opera. But one of the best things about A Night at the Opera was that finale where they take on the world of grand opera and destroy the theatre, etc., etc., etc. So you would think they would be looking for something comparable there, but instead of that, it's a very strange scene, which is comic to start with, when they keep trying to stop the race from beginning. So there's various sort of comedic ways of stopping it. But once it starts, I think we're supposed to be excited, aren't we? I think we're supposed to want to, come on, Harpo, and we're supposed to really be getting into this race, because nothing funny happens, apart from, I suppose, the attempts to make the horse go faster by getting whatever he's called, Douglas Dumbrill, to talk into a mic and all that. Apart from that, it's just like an exciting action scene which has no business whatsoever in a Marx movie.
Is there one particular shot that specifically bothers you?
Oh, well, all the horses falling over I find disgusting, yeah. And there's that horrible bit where one lands on its neck and the camera just cuts, instantly, while they, presumably drag it off and bring on a substitute,
I'm guessing that was Sam Wood's 10th take of that.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, it was the 25th horse that day, I'm sure. But
yeah, wasn't there a famous moment where Sam Wood said you can't make a horse out of clay, and one of the horses?
Yeah. And that was the one that broke its neck, yeah. But interestingly, I don't know that the version we've got obviously has been very, very carefully edited so that we don't get to see what happens to that horse that lands on its neck, etc. But I don't know if that's the original version or not. I do know that in Britain it was cut further for that reason, which gives me a degree of pride. But grotesque and doesn't even try to be funny. So that's my take on the big finale of Day at the Races.
My last one's sort of a cheat, because you're going to go, I don't know whether that qualifies, but I'm going to say it anyhow. I have a tough time sitting through Horse Feathers for one specific reason.
Yes.
This scene with Selma Todd in her apartment that is chopped to shreds for various reasons, which we may get into it some other time, but it's chopped to shreds, and it's very difficult to sit through.
Oh, you're beautiful. Oh, so nice. Bellissima ragazza, veda la faccia d'una Madonna.
That'll overcome me.
Right, but remember...
Oh, no.
Lady, I like you. You got something, but what it is.
I'm going to tell him he's crazy.
I know it's coming. I'm sitting through the whole film. I'm cringing. I'm thinking, oh, God, that scene's coming up. That's coming up. And then I sit through it, and it's just a mess. And it sort of destroys the flow of the film for me, even though it's only like a minor 2-minute section. Maybe I'm anal. I know I'm an editor. I'm an editor as a profession, so the editing, really is very prominent for me. And so when I see this, it's hard for me to deal with.
It's unfortunate, certainly.
Yeah.
I can't say it bothers me too much, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, this is why John Tefteller gets so cross with me from time to time, is because I don't really care about restorations much. I don't really care about the quality of the film, as long as I can hear the jokes, as long as I can see their faces. I'm not too bothered. It is a great pity that scene is incomplete, but it's I certainly don't worry about it. I certainly don't care about future generations or any of that nonsense.
I hear an ambulance going by. What's going on there?
Who's it going by? It's not going by me.
Okay. Oh, it's probably on my end.
Yeah, it's going by now.
I'm here in New York City.
Yeah, that's which one of us is in New York City.
Yeah. I'm sitting in the midst of a raging apocalypse around me.
Anyhow, I've taken it on my own in the past to try and re-edit that scene to make it somewhere coherent, and I think I did a fairly good job. I think perhaps we'll post it on the blog. When they did the restoration, I submitted this.
And how far did that get you?
I sent it in, never heard anything back.
I must admit, though, it is a very professional job. You can't tell which bits are from the real film and which bits are you, restaging them on a similar set. It's very cleverly done, I must say.
My son did a great job as Thelma. Yeah.
I guess I fall on the side of being less bothered by the choppiness of that scene. I mean, I certainly wish that we had it in its entirety, and also because that scene has a connection to I'll Say She Is and the Napoleon scene and participation of Will Johnstone, I have even extra reasons for wishing it were intact, but it doesn't bother me. I don't find it painful, and a little bit like the way we talk about some of the technical shortcomings of the Coconuts. You know, when I see those lines chopped in half in that scene in Horse Feathers, I think of the age of the film and how lucky we are to have these films in any form at all. My third moment and the worst, actually, now, as I think about it, maybe this doesn't even count, because I don't know that, for all intents and purposes, the Marx Brothers are not in the roller skating sequence in the big store.
We've got to get this picture to Tommy immediately. There he is.
But it is, for me, just about the lowest we ever get. You know, it has nothing to do with them. It's just their images, more or less, being, sliding back and forth across the screen, pursuing or being pursued by the villains. And sometimes with the last three MGMs, as a way of moderating our dislike, we say, well, if it were another comedy team, this would be good material. It's just we expect so much more from the Marx Brothers. But it's hard to think of any comedy team who this would not have been well beneath.
And what's particularly frustrating is that we know Chico really was able to skate quite well, because he was in the he was in the roller derby in France in 1949. I don't know if you've ever seen the film, where he really could skate quite well for a man approaching 60.
Yeah, there's a spate of news stories from 1924. Forgive me for my I'll Say She Is centric view of the Marx Brothers' career. But in 1924, when they were playing at the casino, they were ticketed for not moving their cars to legal parking spaces during intermission or something. And so in protest, the Marx Brothers skated to the theater every day for some period of time. And there are news photos. In fact, in Robert Bader's book of Groucho's magazine articles, Groucho Marx and Other Short Stories and Tall Tales, he's got a photograph of the Marx Brothers skating down Broadway on their way to the casino. And there were news accounts at the time saying that, I think with very little credibility, that they had sea legs or skate legs all through the second show, the first day they did that. Also funny that the news coverage tended to point out that although the Marx Brothers skated down Broadway to the theater, they obeyed all the traffic rules. So any kids who are reading along.
They just come off, I guess, what was considered a pretty successful finale in Go West, and they were like, well, how can we top this? Or how can we emulate it? So they weren't even thinking what was best for the film. They were thinking, what can we do in relation to previous finales? Could we top it? Could we? Yeah,
I don't mind it. I think of it as very much of a piece with the rest of the big store, to be honest. I have no expectations of the big store. I just know that it's not going to bother me like the previous two did. And, if they want to muck about on roller skates, then all right, let them do it. It's obviously it's not typical, it's not funny, but at least it's not actively annoying me. I don't mind it. I particularly like the way Chico keeps saying wacky flywheel over and over again. If you actually watch as they're going about wacky flywheel, it says it about 400 times. But there we are. It's okay.
Bob Gassell is our resident newsman at the Marx Brothers Council podcast. We rely on him to keep us up to date with all the headlines from 1905 to 1949.
All right. Yeah, I've come across a few noteworthy stories recently. This is from the Atlanta Constitution. It's dated February 20th, 1937. Headline, Chico Marx saves bird, escapes tardy penalty. Dateline, Hollywood. For being late at the film set where they are working, the Marx Brothers fixed a penalty of $25. Harpo had already paid $25, and Groucho had contributed $50. But when it came to Chico's turn to be tardy, his pocketbook went scot-free. He saw a seagull suddenly fall to the ground as he passed the country club yesterday. Chico rescued the bird and found the wing was broken, apparently by a flying golf ball. The other Marx men called his act humanitarian and waived the fine. Of course, if they insist, Chico said, I can always give them the bird.
Yeah, that actually did happen. I know for a fact. I've been.
Well, that's how Chico got his nickname, right?
Absolutely,
Chico.
Yeah. Because of his habit of helping golf-injured birds. These stories, you just wonder how. I mean, let's assuming that didn't happen. I guess it could have. Yeah. But these are the work. Of course, these stories are written by people who are paid to do it. That's what fascinates me. Right. These are people who don't. They're not even on the set. They're in an office somewhere, and they're typing away. And this is what they do. They go into the office in the morning. They get in the car. They drive in, sit down, take the cover off their typewriter, and then write nonsense about people making movies for that studio. And then we sort of we have this weird sifting process where we keep the ones we like, the ones that are ridiculous we forget about.
Yeah, there's a couple of possibilities. A is that there's like a germ of truth, and then the PR person went haywire on it. Or B, that the PR person came up with a good joke and fit the Marx Brothers into it.
Yeah.
Yes, sometimes with these kind of stories we think like, well, that's a very neat and funny little anecdote and it's too perfect. I'm sure it didn't happen. That was made up by a publicist. And sometimes with these stories we think, oh, that must have been made up by a publicist. But why? Why bother? Why go to the effort to perpetuate that falsehood?
Was there a reporter there to see this happen? How did AP get a hold of this story? So anyhow, let me move on to the next story. The Cameron Sun in Cameron, Missouri, in February 13th, 1941. The Marx Brothers at Ritz. Presenting the Marx Brothers, Groucho, Chico, and Harpo, and their first period picture, Go West, a wild and woolly comedy laid out in the 1870 outdoors, comes to the Ritz Theater Wednesday for an engagement for 3 days. The Marxists say this is their epic Western to end all Westerns. It is the first time anyone has ever poked fun at the big bad men, hard-boiled sirens, lovely heroines, and brave heroes of the early West. The Marxists do so by making the picture a howl from start to finish. To help things along, they don Pioneer Day costumes, revamped to suit their own ideas.
Yep. Again.
Sounds good. Yeah. I'd like to see that.
Absolutely true, yeah. It did end all Westerns. It's absolutely true. I watched it, and it ended all Westerns.
And apparently they were the first ones to ever think of this.
Yeah. That's why they were so ahead of their time.
It's not the best Marx Brothers movie, but it obviously is the best Western ever made.
Yes.
I mean, I think we all agree on that.
They're saying it was the first time anybody's ever thought of poking fun. Did they not see Way Out West, which had come out 3 years before?
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes this period so sad, isn't it? That after a career of being the first to do so many things, the Marx Brothers had become in so many ways imitative by that time. But
it's right there in the publicity, isn't it? There's an At the Circus ad that literally talks about their old time comedy. It's this very strange feeling that they're like kind of old comedians who are being brought back for some nostalgic fun.
Perhaps after Room Service, people were like, oh, we want the old kind of Marx Brothers comedy, which might have precipitated that, right?
Or it's making a distinction between what the Marx Brothers did and what was in vogue in the 40s.
Yeah, I think so. It's more... Yeah.
Because it wasn't like that during Day at the Races, but at the circus, they had become a nostalgia act.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much. If you look at the reviews for those 1940s Laurel and Hardy films that everybody hates, I mean, I quite like them. But the reviews don't say these films are bad compared to their great films at Hull Roach. They just say it's Laurel and Hardy. It's that act from 10 years ago doing their usual thing, and you might like it and the kids might like it, but it's totally passé. That was the kind of take on it, and there's a slight feeling that the same is being said about the Marx Brothers, which is unbearable, really.
I do think, as we've pointed out in the past, there is an aspect of just the way one consumed movies during this period, and that, you know, even the greatest fans, they hadn't seen all the early films dozens and dozens of times and knew every beat by heart. And so it wasn't so much, here's another item in the canon. It was, well, here's this year's entry in the Marx Brothers films. And this one isn't as good as the one from 4 years ago. I don't think it was as big a concern as just, we get to go see a Marx Brothers movie.
Exactly, yes. So I got one more here. This is from the Wisconsin State Journal from Madison, Wisconsin. This is December 26, 1937. And actually, I'm not going to read the headline. I'm going to read the story, a part of the story here, and then I'll do the headline at the end. The great men of the world seemingly all have their favorite movie stars. Adolf Hitler enjoys the Marx Brothers. The headline of the story is Hitler chooses Marx Brothers as favorites.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yes. This was when? 1937?
This was 1937.
Right.
And the dating of that, I had quite an epiphany on this, that perhaps the Marxists read this, and as they're part of their way to fight the Third Reich, they decided to make those last 3 MGS.
I think you're onto something.
So this means then that searing anti-war satire of Duck Soup just went over his head. He just didn't get it. He simply didn't get it.
Wow, I wonder how big a fan Hitler was. You know, did he know about Gummo and Manfred?
Yeah. Did he have that LP, that Gary Owens LP? I bet he didn't.
Yes.
Calls himself a fan.
You know, I know that Hitler was interested in The Great Dictator, and although it was, of course, banned in Germany at the time, Hitler had a private print, which I think records indicated he'd watched at least a few times. And I also know that Hitler had lots of connections between, as he saw it, the Jewish problem and American entertainment. Mickey Mouse was considered by the Nazis to be an icon of American Jewish and communist evil. So I wonder how aware he was. I wonder if Hitler thought of the Marx Brothers as Jews. I wonder if he thought of them as Americans. A subject for more research if ever there was one. And perhaps this is going to be somebody's next book.
And it's just a shame he's not around so we could have him as a podcast.
To tell us which was his favorite, yeah.
Coming up after this break, the Marx Brothers Council podcast talks to Joe Adamson himself, the author of Groucho, Harpo, Chico, and Sometimes Zeppo, the seminal book about the brothers Marx.
Ooh, I can't wait.
Here's the patient, Doc.
What's he got?
Unhappy-itis.
I got just what the doctor ordered. Cheese.
Cheese. Sounds good.
Sounds great. It's Cheeto snacks.
Hey, this cheese goes crunch.
Exactly.
Sure, but how's it gonna make him happy, Doc?
Because cheese that goes crunch is fun to eat. Everyone knows that. Happy yet?
He's a cure, Doc.
I'll be the judge of that.
Cheetos brand. Cheese-flavored snacks. If you want to be happy, eat more Cheetos.
Hi, everyone. Bob here. Before we get to our interview with Joe Adamson, a little background. First of all, we were so thrilled to have Joe lined up as our first ever guest on the podcast, and we were determined to make this happen, be hell or high water, and that's pretty much what happened. We had some technical issues getting Joe connected and ended up having to have his end done on the telephone. Because of that, and Matthew being overseas, Matthew was not able to join us for the interview. Also, when we got Joe on the line and started talking, we realized there was a rough connection. There was some clipping, stuttering, distortion, or something going on. But Joe was a busy man, and we weren't sure we were going to be able to get him again, so we just forged ahead with the interview. So what you're going to hear is, something that sometimes sounds a little rough, but it's definitely listenable and definitely enjoyable. And Joe has some great stories to tell and some great insight and some great background to his book. So please bear with us. I think you'll really enjoy the talk, and you'll get used to the audio stuff after a couple minutes. So we'll see you again on the other side of the interview. Enjoy. So we're back here with our special guest, a guy who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyhow because he certainly deserves it. Mr. Joe Adamson. Joe, welcome to the podcast and being our first guest.
Thank you very much.
And Joe and I actually have something in common, which is sort of Marx related. When I was a kid growing up in the Chicago area, I used to go to a summer camp up in northern Wisconsin in a small town called Minocqua. And Joe once told me that that's where he came up with the title of his book.
Yes, and not as the title of my book, but I mean, I was just fooling around. I thought it would be a subtitle. The way I submitted it, this was my master's thesis at UCLA, and I submitted it as Stars of Bedlam. And, I thought it would be a nice pun on Star of Bethlehem. And the subtitle was Groucho, Harpo, Chico and Sometimes Zeppo. And when the book got to Simon & Schuster, Michael Korda just thought that the ideal film book title was Hitchcock Truffaut, which they had already done, but he just thought that's the way you want to title a film book. You want to title it Hitchcock, not, as you may know, there are books out on Buster Keaton's locations.
Yeah.
And I think it's called something like Silent Echoes. And Michael Korda just hated that kind of thing. So he wasn't having anything to do with Stars of Bedlam, and we were casting about for a title. And one of the Simon & Schuster family, one of the guys from the Simon family was sitting right in the room, and he said, I don't know what's wrong with what you got on there, Groucho, Harpo, Chico, and Sometimes Zeppo. So that became the title of the book. But that didn't happen until 1971, and the book was started in 1966.
What's the story with this subtitle, A History of the Marx Brothers and a Satire of the Rest of the World?
Or Celebration in some editions.
That occurred to me separately at some point as I was writing this, and I was making some jab about Hollywood or Paramount, or I was writing that, and I said, "This is really a history of the Marx Brothers and a satire on the rest of the world," because I realized you write something at this length, you sort of develop a voice, and it's not necessarily your voice. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I was developing the voice of somebody who didn't take anything seriously except the Marx Brothers. That's sort of how it was turning out. Mm-hmm. So I just came up with that history of the Marx Brothers and a satire on the rest of the world, and I wrote it down.
Obviously, it's one of the all-time favorites from Marx fans. But in addition to people really being fond of the book, they seem to have a real emotional attachment to it, which I think is very unusual for a film book. I've never heard that.
It's sort of like the way it developed. Yeah. I was kind of expressing a kind of Marxian view of the world, and it became, it's like the Marxian kind of irreverence which sort of informed the whole book. And it's sort of like reading Catch-22 or Cat's Cradle, I guess, for people. I have books that were that kind of thing for me, and discovering Pauline Kael, there's really an emotional attachment to discovering something and realizing, oh my God, this is my voice. It's like John Lennon when he discovered the Surrealists.
You were probably the first author of the generation of the Marx revival of the 60s to do a book. Before then, it had been more of a studious films authors and very dry writing. You really conveyed the personality of the generation that was now appreciating the Marx films.
That's what people liked. I don't know what generation Alan Isles is. He's English, and that was the only book on the Marx Brothers films that really studied each film seriously. Mm-hmm. And I liked that book, and a couple times I laughed out loud reading it. But basically, it's just a very dry approach. Mm-hmm. And I tried a different approach. Another thing, in terms of how the book came about, was that I had a pen pal all through college, James Morrow, if you wanted to Google him. I've read his new book, his latest book, which has not come out yet, and it was somebody who had been making films the same time I was making films in high school, we latched onto each other, and then I went off to college, and we just started writing each other, and our letters just got longer and longer and longer. And we did gags, and we tried to tell each other what was going on in our lives in entertaining ways. And really, we were two apprentice writers teaching each other how to write, you know. And we would review movies that we saw and that kind of thing. And all this went along with my, you know, discovering the Marx Brothers, which happened a little bit earlier than that, but not when I was a child. You know, I hear these stories of Robert Bader and so forth, you know, people discovering the Marx Brothers on television, just channel surfing when they're 7.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was 7, you didn't channel surf. There was no TV in the house. Just, you know, when I was born, there was no television.
Mm-hmm.
I knew about the Marx Brothers because my dad was a big comedy fan.
Mm-hmm.
And he would talk about W.C. Fields and the Marx Brothers, and I knew there were these great films with Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton and the Keystone Cops. And it's hard for kids to understand this now. You just couldn't see these. So I would hear about things at the dinner table, and I knew they were out there, but there was no way of seeing them. And we were in Philadelphia, and I realize now, if you were in New York or Los Angeles, there were Revival House screenings of Marx Brothers films before major studio films came on television. But not in Philadelphia. They took me to anything I wanted to see. So I actually saw Tex Avery cartoons and Abbott and Costello films and that kind of thing, and Three Stooges on the big screen before they ever came on television. So I'm going a long way around and coming back to the fact that Jim and I were writing these letters, and I developed we developed kind of an entertaining style because we were trying to entertain each other, and we were trying to top each other with literary feats in these letters. So some of that style got into the book as I started writing it, because when I started it, it was just a school project. It was not intended for publication.
What was the chapter you did first?
I started with Night at the Opera, and what was in my head was that Monkey Business, the films from Monkey Business to Day at the Races, those 5 films, would be the core of the book, and everything else, including their vaudeville years, would be the beginning of it, and the end of it would be the films after Day at the Races. Room Service and At the Circus, you know, I pretty well understood those were lesser projects.
Right.
I was a senior in college at UCLA Film School, and I had nowhere to go. The Vietnam War was on, and if I left school, I was going to be instantly inducted into the Army. So I applied to grad school for no other reason than I had to stay in school. Grad students got deferments, but in 1967 that ran out. I had a deferment for 1 year, and that enabled me to get the thing started.
So basically, we have Lyndon Johnson to thank for the book.
It was an incredible time, and so I was entering grad school and thinking, geez, this is going to have to be good if I'm going to get 4 units of graduate film study credit at UCLA. So I really put all the effort I had into it, but I'd been training myself for this for the last 4 years. I'd been writing these letters with Jim Morrow, and it really hit my professor. It really just knocked him out. When he read it, he just flipped. And he said, you got to finish this. A friend of mine joked, he said, you don't have an MA degree, all you have is 128 units of Marx Brothers. I was supporting myself for the first time in my life. And meanwhile, I had this project. I was lugging from apartment to apartment. I moved, I think, 10 times in that space of 3 years while I was trying to get this thing written. Really kind of incredible. So Night at the Opera, I started first because I knew where I was going with that. Randy Skredfeld, who has done the Ultimate Laurel and Hardy book, has said the same thing. He started somewhere in the middle. Babes in Toyland or something was the film he first started writing, actually drafting material. So I had ideas in my head. I was taking notes on 3x5 cards, but when it actually came to drafting, I had some time, and I actually started drafting what finally became the book.
So let me ask you, obviously your feelings and thoughts on the brothers and their films has evolved over the years. What film do you feel most differently about now than when you did it?
Maybe Night in Casablanca, which I really, if you pick up the book and read what I wrote about Night in Casablanca now, it's really very negative, and I have to explain to people, I was a starving student, and I had to figure out how to screen all these films so that I could write about them intelligently. And I had quarter-inch tape recordings of some of them, Monkey Business being one. I know I had that on tape. And I would go to screenings and just write down the dialogue as it happened, While I was working on the book, my professor, Howard Zuber, said, look, they're showing Night in Casablanca at the Pizza Parlor, which was right there in Westwood Village near UCLA. So I went and ordered my pizza, and I would sit through 2 screenings a night, and I did this for 2 nights, writing down the dialogue as people were saying it. It just wasn't the best way to see any film, but definitely to see a 1946 film in 1967, it just wasn't making it for me the way Duck Soup did, or Night at the Opera. I was writing about films made in the 1930s.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, in the era of Sgt. Pepper and all this stuff, and there was a reason I was doing that. It was because I thought the Marx Brothers were so great, and their surreal humor was very topical and just of the moment, and the attitude they struck. I mean, it's one reason people say now, well, of course, people in the 60s like Duck Soup because it's anti-war. Well, nobody said Duck Soup was anti-war until 1967, 1968.
Right.
And then you look at it, and it just takes an irreverent attitude toward politics and war and the whole thing. That's all it does. It's not an anti-war film, or nobody thought it was.
Right.
But that seemed very timely. So to look at Night in Casablanca at that point, it's just like, no, this is not making it. It's not surreal. It's 3 old comedians trying to be funny. But Eddie Bazell said, I didn't have 3 pixies to work with. I had 3 old men pretending they were pixies. And that's what I saw. And it's now generally agreed, I think, to be the best of later films.
Groucho seems to be having a good time, which he really hadn't since the Thalberg films.
Well, he has that beautiful white suit.
Definitely the best thing they did after A Day at the Races, and some people think it's even better than that.
Yeah, a lot of Day at the Races overproduced quality. It doesn't have. The Marx Brothers were 3 of the producers of Night in Casablanca. Because they were producers of the film and they didn't have the big studio bureaucracy to deal with, which is what... Well, I mean, that's why Day at the Races is this big bloated thing. But it's also, they had to slog all the way through At the Circus, Go West, and Big Store. I mean, if you think they're hard to watch, these guys had to actually go make them. It's just dealing with arts, with Louis B. Mayer did not appeal to them, and now they were more in the driver's seat, and there's plot stuff that they were able to cut. There was plot stuff that I know was shot that they cut out, and even that boy and that girl, they don't have the sickly quality that Kenny Baker does in At the Circus and that kind of thing. There's a lot of the stuff that's really annoying about their later films that isn't there in Night in Casablanca. It's really it's kind of fun when it works. It's really clicking.
It's quite amazing that they were able to make something that good in a 1940s atmosphere when their best stuff was done out of the Roaring 20s and early 30s, and now here they are like 10, 15 years after their best work. Yeah,
and Frank Tashland's contribution is worthwhile. I can't tell you how many times, speaking of Night in Casablanca, here's a real tidbit about it. When people learn that I'm doing work on the Marx Brothers, or I have done work on the Marx Brothers, about half the time, the thing that their eyes light up and they go, "Which film is it?" Where they ask Harpo, "What do you think you're doing, holding up that building?" And they pull him away, and the building falls down. That is one of the favorite gags of all time for the Marx Brothers. and it almost didn't get done. I think it was one of the last things actually photographed for the film.
We recorded earlier and started to talk about our least favorite moments in the Marx films. And we're not talking about maybe some romantic subplots or songs we didn't like, or even gags that we didn't think were funny, but just things that when you watch, you go, ooh, I wish they wouldn't have done that, or that bothers me. Do you have anything that stands out?
The only things I can think of are either romantic subplot moments, like Alan Jones punching, what's his name, in Night at the Opera. But there's just a couple things like that. I was going to say in Night in Casablanca, when he says, until I saw you two, I thought every date in town was broken. I mean, oh, come on. But I guess also there's the moment where, in Day at the Races, where Groucho makes a joke and Marino Sullivan says, silly.
Yeah.
Matthew's not here, but what always bothers him in A Day at the Races, where in the opening scene when Groucho is being interviewed.
Judy, it seems to me, if I may say so, we are making rather a hasty decision.
I'm satisfied with Mrs. Upjohn's recommendations.
You know why that line is there? It's sort of MGM's version of filling in instead of leaving you hanging. Like so some of the criticism in the Duck Soup podcast was, who is Margaret Dumont playing, and why is she devoted to having Groucho be the head of Fredonia? None of that is explained. All of a sudden, Groucho is being inaugurated as the head of Fredonia. That would never satisfy Louis B. Mayer.
Yeah, it was important for them to justify the plot line.
I think that works, but I mean the idea of Groucho being a horse doctor and having to hide that is one of the uncomfortable moments. You just don't need that. It starts getting back into situation comedy, and if you study Buster Keaton at all, he has a line about why he didn't like to do films like that. Films like the Eddie Cantor films. He tried not to do. He said, in every film like that, there's one character that if they just said, wait a minute, this is the situation, all the action would stop. and he's absolutely right. And it's just maddening for me to watch these things. I can't stand them, but that's why Monkey Business is such a delight and Duck Soup. I'm developing, as I think Matthew knows, a book on the golden age of comedy. And basically, I think the great ones all get away from that situation comedy.
Joe, refresh my memory. When did your book come out in relation to the Animal Crackers re-release?
It was ahead of that. And, of course, I didn't know it was coming. I mean, in other words, people always say Animal Crackers was never shown on television, and I beg to differ. I remember when major studio films first came on television, I would scan the TV guide every week, and that's how I saw The Bank Dig and Never Give a Sucker an Even Break. And I know I saw Day at the Races and At the Circus repeatedly. The first one I saw was The Big Store, and then Day at the Races came on, At the Circus came on, and then a few months later, Day at the Races came on again, and then At the Circus came on again, and for a while it was just those three films were all I had seen. But at that point, Animal Crackers was scheduled to be shown in Philadelphia, and I think it was either The Late Show, which came on at 11:30, which was just too late for me. I was still a kid. Or it was even later than that. It was like 1 in the morning. Sometimes films you really wanted to see would come on like at 1 in the morning, because they were now doing, instead of having a test pattern all night, they would actually show an old movie or something and go later into the night than they had been going. And I swear, Animal Crackers came on, and it was so late I could never see it. And I thought, all right, next time it comes on, maybe it'll come on at a decent hour, and I'll get to see it. Well, I think it was screened a couple times in New York, and either George S. Kaufman or his daughter or somebody said, wait a minute, don't we have rights to that? Can they show that without paying us? And Universal, instead of solving the legal problem, simply shelved the film. So I can see why people say it was never shown on television, because that was virtually never, not absolutely never. I think it was shown.
In retrospect, it was really fortunate because in the midst of this great revival of the team, you basically have a new film that most people haven't seen.
And it happens to be their best.
What happened was Bob Epstein at UCLA was very sympathetic to the project. He was very big on old movies, which most of the instructors at UCLA were not. There was this very much now generation kind of attitude among film students at that time, and so old Hollywood films were not regarded very highly. And the Marx Brothers were a little bit different from that, but some people had trouble understanding why I was devoting all this time to films that had been made 30 years ago when we were making better films, right now. So anyway, my book came out in September 73. So there was about a 6-month period where the only way you could find out what happened in Animal Crackers was to buy my book, which was only available in hardback. So it was a $10 venture at that time, which is something like saying, $25 today. Bob Epstein, in the 60s, was very sympathetic to the book. He was in touch with William K. Everson, and William K. Everson would send him films to screen at UCLA. And he said, I'll ask him to send me Animal Crackers next time. Well, that took 2 years. I think there was a year that he never did send a film. And it was 1969 before that actually happened. So here I was writing, never having seen Animal Crackers and not realizing how good it was. Alan Isles said it was not as good a film as Coconuts, and I hated Coconuts, so I thought, oh God, this must be miserable, but I'm going to have to see it, And when I saw it in it was screened at UCLA in a nice theater, and it was jam-packed. And I'll tell you, they tore the place apart. They laughed at every joke. And I mean, some of the jokes, like Harpo bouncing the check, just got enormous laughs. I recorded the whole thing, and it's just the laughter was incredible. It was an incredible way to see it, and it's one of my favorite Marx Brothers films now. But I really didn't expect anything like that.
I recall seeing some sort of bootleg showing in like 1972, long before the re-release in a suburban Chicago theater, and I remember thinking, I don't know what the reason is why I haven't seen this anywhere else, but this is as good as it gets.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of understanding what they were like on the stage, it really is a much better example than Coconuts.
Coconuts was, so much longer apparently in its first cut. Did they basically shoot the entire show and then cut it down in editing?
I think they figured that was the quickest way to go about it, and Maury Riskin did the screenplay for Animal Crackers, and they made the cuts ahead of time. They cut a lot of the music, and the song that's in there, Why Am I So Romantic, was composed for the film. That was not in the play. That's really kind of remarkable.
Yeah, musical comedy goes to film with all new music.
Yeah, hooray for Captain Spaulding survives. Right. I read an interview with Harpo where he said, it's funny, this thing is still called Animal Crackers, but all the animal jokes in it, for the reason it was called Animal Crackers, all failed to work. So they were dropped, everything except there's the gags with the canary are still in there, but that's about it. Apparently there were other animal gags, and they didn't work. They did some stuff with horses on the road tour today at the races, too. And I think the problem is, I remember we brought a goat on stage for one of the shows that I was involved with in high school. And it's like, that's just very distracting to the audience because they're very aware that this animal is up there and doesn't know what's going on. It just kind of throws people. So I guess the reason it's called Animal Crackers, there's now no reason that it's called Animal Crackers. But apparently there was a reason for that, and there were a lot of animal jokes.
And all the other titles are so logical.
Yeah, they kind of said, there was no reason for the title I'll Say She Is. Yeah. There really is. I mean, if you look at the text.
Sure, it's even a line from the show.
Yeah. There is some logic to it, and there's some logic to Coconuts. And then it just got into, okay, let's find some animals. We called that one Animal Crackers. We'll call this one Monkey Business. And it just went on from there.
And duck soup the rest of your life.
Until they did A Night at the Opera, and then that was the change. As long as we've brought up animal crackers, let me just say the new version, the new digital restoration is really tremendous. And there's stuff in there that I think I knew was there, but it was still, I had notes. I have notes on all the films and all the research I've done in the scripts, but there were still some surprises when I saw it. But it's been referred to as the British version. This complete print was found at the BFI, but this is the version that was released in the United States and Canada and England and Scotland and Ireland and everywhere else as animal crackers. But there probably some of those things that were cut. I mean, like, I think I'll Try to Make Her. I'm sure that was not screened in Philadelphia or anywhere in the state of Pennsylvania with that line in it. I'm sure that cut was made in Pennsylvania, but that was the problem. That's why the Hayes office finally clamped down in '34, because there was all sorts of local censorship that was going on, and prints were getting chopped up, and they just said we have to be consistent about this.
When they were doing the search for these films for the restoration for the box set, I don't think anybody expected them to find an uncut animal crackers, because nobody even knows when it was last seen in that version.
I think that Universal doesn't appreciate what they have, because when I first saw it, it was introduced by a Universal representative, and he just kind of tossed that off very lightly. He said, "Yeah, I think there's some stuff in there that wasn't there before," just very casually. I mean, there's about 3-4 minutes worth of stuff, and it's all gold. A lot of people thought when they said, okay, restored versions of the Marx Brothers films, a lot of people just assumed that all that footage that's been chopped out of horse feathers was just magically back in there, and unfortunately that's not the case. Can I say one thing about that book that's very ironic, is that when I was writing it, my main focus was trying to impress people older than me. My professor, Howard Stuber, was about he was only 7 or 8 years older than I was. He had a lot of new ideas. But I mean, he was older than I was. I was hoping people like William K. Everson and Pauline Kael was one of the early admirers of the book and one of the great supporters, even before Howard Stuber latched onto it. She was very encouraging and helpful. My focus was trying to impress people older than myself.
Would Groucho be one of those people?
Yeah, and it turned out he did like it. Now that as soon as the book came out, like, all the fan letters were from teenagers. They were all from people, and I was no longer a teenager by the time it came out. They were all from people younger than I was, and it seems to have had its greatest impact on people younger than I was. I had only the slightest idea that anybody younger than me might even read it.
It's iconoclastic. It's iconoclastic, and it captures the iconoclasm of the Marx Brothers in a way that, I mean, I think it appeals to everybody, but young people in particular are so attuned to that spirit of iconoclasm.
It's almost as if I wrote it for adolescents, but I didn't.
And for all those people out there who are wondering, where's the ebook version, where's the audiobook version, let me tell you, this book is best enjoyed in its original hardcover, beautiful edition with the silver slipcover, which I basically wore out and had to replace with a stolen one from my public library.
Me too. Same exact story. Yep. I think I've had 3 of them over the years.
I want to ask you one last thing about this photo of you on the back cover with you got your long locks and beautiful sweater, very telling look to the camera.
That photo was taken at Penn State. I was an instructor by the time that photo was taken. And if you look at the bottom of the photo, my arms are crossed on Lindsay Duran's head. Oh. And Lindsay Duran was my girlfriend, and she was very helpful all through the time I was writing the book. She critiqued it very intelligently. I mentioned her full name. I'm not going with her anymore. She married somebody else. But I mean, for a while she was head of United Artists. And just the top of her head is visible in that picture.
So it wasn't taken for this purpose, to be on the book.
No, it was taken to be a picture of Lindsay and me, and the campus photographer said, "Hey, if you want me to shoot your picture, I'll be glad to do it." He was there to do
And one last thing before we let you go, and since Matthew couldn't be here, we invite you to speak freely about what you think about Matthew and his book and his work.
Really? Right now?
No, Matthew really wanted, he would like to speak with you on a future podcast. So let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it where we're all speaking, and hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to Noah a little bit more.
I'm just afraid that if we talk, Joe, I'll embarrass you too much for my Catcher in the Rye and my On the Road and my Hop on Pop and all that your book has meant to me.
I have to say, I've never written you the email or the note on Facebook. I intended to. When I read I have your book on Alsatias, and I really appreciate the way you treat my book. Appreciate it very much. I don't know where you got the idea I'm friendly and accessible.
Well, on that note, we're going to let you go, Joe. Once again, we appreciate it, and we hope to talk to you soon. And thanks again.
All right.
Thank you,
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much to Joe Adamson, and thank you very much to all of you for listening to the second episode of the Marx Brothers Council podcast. If you enjoyed it, as ever, please tell your friends, share the link, and leave a comment on iTunes. If you want to win a copy of Noah Diamond's book, Gimme a Thrill, and why would you not want to? Anybody would want to, unless they've got one. In fact, even if they've already got one, they would want to win another one. All you have to do is to go to our website, which from memory I think is marxcast.blogspot.com. Does that sound right?
That sounds right to
Yep.
me.
Go there. You'll find this latest edition there as a blog post, and in a comment, just write the word book. It's as simple as that. Just write the word book. Don't bother putting your address or anything like that. And then what we will do is we will pick a winner. I can't tell you how we'll do it. I can only tell you that it will be scientifically. So you can have no fears there. It will be done scientifically. We'll pick a winner, and then we'll let you know, and you can give us the address, and you'll get a free copy of Noah's book. How about that? Next week, next time. Sorry,
wait. And as always, I have to do this for legal reasons. Legal?
Yep, legal, yep.
As always, Jay Hopkins is not eligible.
As long as your name is not Jay Hopkins, just leave a comment, write the word book, and one of you will be getting a free copy of that book. Next time, we will be talking about A Day at the Races, an entire show devoted to one film, and our special guest will be Frank Ferrante.
Sounds like fun.
It does sound like fun. I'm going to be there.